When I first played Minecraft, I said, eh. But when I played the first Dragon Quest Builders, I went, oh. The original Dragon Quest Builders and now its sequel are basically honorary RPGs. They of course borrow the core fundamentals of Minecraft, but wrap it up in a 45-hour story filled with goals, rewards, and progress. Builders is a well-crafted game first and a creative sandbox second, and that's why I've always been so drawn to this spin-off. That said, the first Builders, while wholesome, charming, and just a whole lot of fun, wasn't flawless, but here comes Builders 2, and it honestly improves on pretty much everything. You can create your own character now, the controls are more flexible, everything's more connected, and not only can you pet the dog, but there's an entire mandatory mission dedicated to it. That's the kind of game this is. Builders 2 takes place after the events of Dragon Quest II, and while Hargon and Malroth have been defeated, the children of Hargon are for some reason still at large, and they've outlawed building around the world. So it's up to you, the builder, to escape the children of Hargon, journey to different lands, and inspire everyone to start creating again. But this is made a bit more complicated by your permanent party member who for whatever reason shares the name Malroth, the name of the villain. There's certainly mysteries to be uncovered. The actual tone's pretty light-hearted with its quirky Dragon Quest dialogue, but there are some twisty moments in the story of Builders 2, especially in the second half. I mean, it goes places you'd never expect a game about laying down blocks to go. Though there are a few pacing issues, with the first hour being a bit of a drag, and I kept expecting the game to end, but it kept on going. Seriously, I thought it was final boss time, but there was another 6-hour area to go through first. But the way Builders 2 ties everything together is where it majorly improves over the first game. You see, in Builders 1, whenever you finish a chapter, in the next you'll start over from scratch. None of your items carried over, and you basically lost everything. So you could spend 10 hours building up an entire area, only for all that progress to stay locked in that chapter. Builders 2 though has what's essentially a hub world. Now whenever you finish a chapter, everything in your inventory can come back with you to the Isle of Awakening. And not only is it your hub, but it's also your free building area. You can do whatever you like here, and while Builders 1 had a similar area, the way it was so disconnected from everything else didn't exactly encourage me to use it. The Isle of Awakening though has so many more incentives, and there's even optional goals for you to clear in your own time. Even when the game isn't objective based, there's still a ton of things for you to do. There's also some clear inspirations taken from Breath of the Wild. The builder can now sprint, and a bit more directly Breath of the Wild, paraglide. And while mini medals are basically a staple of Dragon Quest, the way you gain them here basically mirror Korok seeds with light puzzles scattered around the world. And for a game about exploration and resource collecting, these mechanics feel incredibly justified. I initially thought just slowly climbing down mountains without taking damage was just part of the game, but that was instantly mitigated when soaring through the skies with a glider. Likewise, Builders 1 had weapons that slowly lose durability over time, whereas Builders 2 does away with that. And given that this isn't a game focused on combat, that kind of mechanic isn't missed. Though speaking of combat, it's still the weakest part of Dragon Quest Builders. Towards the end of the game, you'll be partaking in fights pretty regularly, and it never really gets much more involved than just mashing the Y button. It feels like they tried to remedy this by basically giving you a permanent party member, but adding more players doesn't exactly make it more fun. Thankfully, most of the time you're only busting on things to get resources, so the combat doesn't get too tiresome. It's only really towards the end of the game. And some more actiony moments like boss fights feel way more clever than before. Instead of first needing to craft one specific item and laying them out strategically, the game relies more on the core parts of your moveset. I never had to restart a fight in Builders 2 because I didn't have what I needed, whereas I certainly did in the first game. Town residents would even fix up any damages made to your town during these events, whereas in the original Builders you were left with an aftermath of destruction, though I honestly quite liked those high stakes. But on the flip side, if you spend hours and hours building up your town, you of course don't want it to go to waste. Naturally, for a game about building, there's quite a bit of busy work in Builders 2, though you're not the only builder this time. Over the course of a chapter, your fellow residents slowly get more inspired by your building techniques to the point where you can delegate to them. For instance, in the first island you visit, it's all about farming, and eventually you'll learn how to make a storage room, and any seeds that you store in here will be planted by those NPCs. It goes further than this though, as there are some points where NPCs flat out build giant blueprints for you. This may be where it goes a little too far. It's used as a chapter climax in the first part of the game, but becomes a bit more prominent towards the end. It can take a lot of the freedom away because you're building exactly what this blueprint says, and there were points where I finished all my missions and just sat around as the NPCs built my tower for me. It's great seeing everyone come together, but this kind of act should have been used a lot more sparingly. But even with a few low moments in the story, Builders 2 has the ultimate post-game. Not only do you have hundreds of materials to work with and towns to build, but you can do it all online with friends, and in the Switch version via local wireless too. This is for me where everything culminates. And yeah, I'm not big on Minecraft, but after being invested in this game for so long, this kind of creative burst feels right. The Switch version though is a little bit of an oddball. The game itself is terrific and looks mostly identical to the PlayStation 4 version, but the Switch's fan basically never stops whirling. It's a bit better in handheld mode, but not by much. The fan just keeps blowing away more than any other Switch game I've played, and as you can imagine, that takes a toll on the battery life. And that's not the only Switch-related problem. The game takes a long time to boot up. I mean, look at this. HD rumble in handheld mode is also pretty awful. And for some reason, when a distant voice talks to you, it stays on screen for a long time. Any other text, you can just do this. But this text, I don't know what's up. So it's perhaps not the most optimized port. It looks good and still has everything, but in addition to these issues, the frame rate can take random dives. It's mostly solid, but you'll find instances where it decides to just chop down for a couple of seconds. Far from game breaking, but it can certainly be distracting. And musically, things are a bit disappointing there too. Just like Builders 1, these tracks originate from other games in the series, and there's even tracks that were in Builders 1 and are also in Builders 2. These range from subtle background music to even overworld music. Have a listen. Dragon Quest Builders 2 is the kind of game you play for hundreds and hundreds of hours, and with the sheer amount of content and things to do, it's consistently enjoyable to do so. It addresses a lot of the problems with the original, while enveloping it in a brand new story with a ton of mechanics to play around with. Not everything is perfect, and the Switch port in particular could have been crafted for a bit longer, but looking around and seeing pictures from Japanese players and being inspired by what was made in the story, the potential feels near limitless. Over the course of your journey, you'll build giant bars, castles, and other crazy contraptions, and while there are a few low points, they're heavily outweighed by the highlights. I like Dragon Quest Builders 2 a lot. I wanted to love it because both this game and its predecessor have a ton of potential, but the problems do stack up a bit too much. Thanks so much for watching, and of course be sure to subscribe to Game Explained for a lot more on Dragon Quest Builders 2 and other things gaming too. Until next time, bye.